You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Hello. Welcome to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, presented by BuckeyeGrove.com. I am your happy, chippy host, Kyle Lamb, and it is just a beautiful day, and everything is roses and lollipops in Buckeye land. It is a wonderful week. There is no reason to be unhappy whatsoever. We all love each other. We are all friends. We all get along. No, for real, everybody. Thanks for joining Unscripted Ohio. It has been, to say the least, a tumultuous week in Buckeye Nation. Crazy, crazy stuff going on. Urban Meyer, as we start the first day of fall camp, will not be Ohio State's acting head coach as he is on paid administrative leave. Ryan Day, of course, stepping in to take over for him on an interim basis. A independent, and I'm using air quotes when I say that because you know these independent panels are never actually independent, but an independent board has been assigned and tasked with investigating whether Urban Meyer committed violations when he did not allegedly report what he allegedly knew about the allegations of Zach Smith allegedly committing spousal abuse against his ex-wife, Courtney Smith. Did I say allegedly enough? Because I want to emphasize that it was allegedly, because we are operating on very few actual facts right now. So if I'm being a little over redundant in the number of times I'm using allegedly, it's because I'm being a little bit of a smarty pants right now. Yes, I'm using my sarcastic voice to overcompensate for a lack of, let's call it objective reporting. And again, I'm using sarcasm when I say that. Okay, so here's the deal. Here later in the show, I'm going to talk a little bit of basketball. That's actually the sport right now people have at Ohio State to really look forward to, simply because these past few weeks really has drained the excitement out of the 2018 season. And I'm curious, how do you feel about that? Are you still excited about 2018? The preseason coaches poll came out yesterday. The Buckeyes were ranked number 3, but I am actually curious, are you still excited by what you potentially think you can see on the field for Ohio State in 2018? I want you to tweet at me, KYLAM, the number 8. Tell me, are you excited, despite all this, are you excited about the potential for the 2018 Buckeyes, even with that stormy rain cloud that is the Urban Meyer, not suspension but paid administrative leave, hanging over the Woody Hayes Athletic Facility right now? Good thing they're indoors, right? They'll be practicing with all that rain coming down. But so anyway, I will talk some basketball, and it is exciting to be an Ohio State basketball fan right now. You probably, if you got to see the open practice, and there's, I would guess, about 800 in attendance on Tuesday to see the Buckeyes before they flew out to Spain. They'll now be spending the next several days playing basketball in Spain in that tournament. It'll be interesting to see what Ohio State does there, but I'll have my thoughts on basketball and how they looked. That was my second time seeing them at an open practice, the first being about a 30-minute session that was open to the media a few weeks ago. So I'll have some thoughts on the basketball team. That should be a good way if you were really dark and gloomy about this Ohio State football stuff. Hey, just concentrate, focus your efforts on the basketball team. There's a lot to love about that team that I'll get into. They're young, they're excitable, they're spirited, a lot of energy. They compete hard. They're great guys. I think you're going to love this Ohio State basketball team. There were some positives and some negatives I saw. As you would imagine, it's only July, so there's not a lot to take away from a 1-hour open practice in July when a team is full of 6 newcomers, 4 freshmen, a regular transfer, sophomore transfer, and then a graduate transfer. I'll talk about the basketball team later, but there are some positives, there are some negatives to discuss with that. Now, Urban Meyer, as you know, under administrative leave by Ohio State as they have formed this, again, air quotes when I say this, investigative panel, investigative board, independent board, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Ohio State has formed this task force, and they will get to the bottom of whether Urban Meyer committed violations. Now, you know, if you've been following me on Twitter the last few days, I've been talking a lot about Title IX. Does that apply to Urban Meyer? My answer is no on that, by the way. Does the sexual misconduct policy apply to Urban Meyer's situation? The answer for me on that is probably not, but I'm going to leave just a little bit of wiggle room. I'll explain that in a minute. But I have been talking on Twitter a lot about these two aspects of the situation here with Zach Smith and Courtney Smith. Before I get into the details of that, what I want the focus of this show to be for me, I want to ask people a question, and I don't want this to come from a standpoint of, do you think Zach Smith is guilty of the allegations against Courtney Smith? I don't want to get into that road. I don't want to assume Urban Meyer did or did not know, because honestly, there are a lot of people jumping to a lot of facts right now, and we really don't have the facts. Even if you think Urban Meyer knew about these allegations, what exactly did he know? That hasn't been established. Did he know there were problems in the marriage? Probably. Did he know that there were allegations made against Zach at some point? Maybe. Did he know they were criminal? That's hard to say. And when did he know these things? You know, the two alleged criminal complaints made, I shouldn't say alleged because there are two criminal complaints made by Courtney Smith in late 2015, but they were made in late 2015. According to her, the other day speaking, she spoke both in a televised interview as well as the interview that she made in the text that she provided to Brett McMurphy. She was not real clear about when in 2015 she had this alleged conversation with Shelley Meyer. So we don't know the timing of what was relayed to Shelley. We don't exactly know the details of what she told Shelley. We just know generally that she allegedly, again, I'm going to use that word again, because we really don't even know this for sure. But we don't know what she told her. We don't know what the timing was. There's just so much about this we don't know. So there's really nothing that anybody can take away from this whole thing to come away saying, yeah, Urban Meyer is clearly guilty, Zach Smith is clearly guilty, Courtney Smith is clearly a liar. We just don't know a lot of facts right now. But the question I want to ask, even if you assume Zach Smith is guilty or maybe guilty or Urban Meyer had reason to believe he was guilty of a domestic dispute, if you accept the premise that there was something to actually report, and keep in mind, Courtney Smith has said that, you know, she's admitted that, and we know this from Brett McMurphy's reporting, and I know I don't even want to use Brett McMurphy on the podcast because I know that name probably makes your blood boil. Maybe it's because he's Irish. Maybe it's because of the beard. I don't know. The mustache. Maybe the mustache really gets to you. Does your blood boil when you see Brett McMurphy's mustache? I know he was on Scott Van Pelt the other day, and I have a 65-inch TV, and I was just flipping through the channels, and I saw it, and I did not have any intention of watching the interview, and I did not have any intention of keeping it on the channel, but I happened to see that as I was flipping through, and just seeing that mustache, oh boy, that got me going. Maybe it's what I should be thinking, because I was telling my good friend Corey of the Scarlet and Gray podcast, I was actually telling him I was having a hard time deciding on what angle to come in to this podcast today. And I tried the really ultra serious approach. I tried the really opinionated, angry approach, and it felt forced. It was like I was trying too hard to be angry. This time, this feels a little bit natural. Now that I've settled in, and I'm just kind of letting it fly. I didn't script anything. I didn't write any notes down. I'm just letting this go, and it feels a little more natural. But anyhow, so we don't really know. We know from Brett McMurphy's reporting, and we know from what Courtney Smith has said, that there were definitely two reports in 2015 that criminal complaints filed against Zach Smith that led to neither an arrest nor any charges being filed. So from that standpoint, we know there were criminal complaints in 2015, but we don't know the timing of when Courtney Smith may have related that to Shelley Meyer. We don't know what she said about those incidents, if anything. Did Shelley Meyer actually have specific allegations, or were they general? I'm just scared of him. And to me, there's a subtle difference in that because, being scared of somebody, that indicates there's a possibility of abuse, but is that an actual allegation? I don't know. And I'm not trying to say that it is or isn't. It's just when it comes to sensitive, delicate matters where technicalities matter within the course of the law, there's a big amount of wiggle room there when it comes to what should be reported and what shouldn't be reported. But if we accept that, so we go back to 2015, I just want to ask you, and this is the theme I want you to be asking yourself, ask other people, because I think it's a fair question. If you're going to say, well, Urban Meyer should have done this, should have done that, which you shouldn't be saying that anyway because we don't have enough facts to really know that. But if you're going to say that, then ask yourself this. What would be the point of reporting? And here is why I say this. If Courtney Smith has said she's gone to the cops however many times, we know of at least 3 times she has filed a criminal complaint. There are reports out there that it may be many more. She's called the cops more than 3 times, allegedly, reportedly, whatever word you want to use to describe that. There may be other incidents out there that may or may not indicate an ongoing domestic abuse by Zach Smith against her. But if she continued to call the cops and the cops continued to not arrest him and not file charges, then you got to ask yourself this. What would Urban Meyer going to Ohio State really accomplish when the people whose job it is within the course of the law had already determined there was not enough evidence to conclude a crime was committed? What does Urban Meyer go do to Ohio State to change that fact? People say because Urban Meyer didn't report him that he's an enabler. Let's say Urban Meyer were to report Zach Smith. Let's say Ohio State says, well, great, this isn't under our jurisdiction. And I'm going to get to that argument here in a second. Don't worry, I'll get to the jurisdiction issue because I've got a few things to say about that. But if Ohio State were to hypothetically say this is not in our jurisdiction, it happened off campus, and because of that, it has nothing to do with Title IX, it has nothing to do with our sexual misconduct policy, they're just going to say if you believe a crime is committed, she needs to call the cops. Well, that's already happened here. She's already called the cops. And guess what? Even if they say, okay, well, let's jot this note down. Let's take a report and we'll pass this along to our supervisors. Guess what? That's not changing anything. And this is why people need to look at the Colorado case, because Joe Tumpkin, the assistant football coach at Colorado, who has since been fired for allegations of abuse by his former girlfriend, this was a case where Colorado, specifically McIntyre, the head football coach, had conversations with her, was told that he was allegedly abusing her. He passed this along to the AD, but that is not the same. Actually, the protocol for a head coach filing an HR report would be to pass it along to your deputy Title IX coordinator. That would be the proper procedure, and that procedure wasn't followed, although McIntyre discussed this with the AD. But what eventually happened, this happened in 2016. He was eventually suspended after the allegations surfaced, after a restraining order was filed against him by the ex-girlfriend, and then eventually he was fired. This resulted in her filing 2 lawsuits, one against Tumpkin himself, and the other one was a lawsuit filed against the head football coach and athletic director and president and chancellor. And this was in a federal court. Just recently, a couple weeks ago, in fact, this lawsuit was actually thrown out by a federal judge who ruled that because this woman, the ex-girlfriend, was not a member of the university community, she was not on campus, she had nothing to do with the university itself, therefore the policy had nothing to do with her. The policy was never meant to protect somebody in her position. Okay? So Colorado, the federal judge, dismissed the lawsuit against these 4 individuals at the University of Colorado, saying she had no protection from the University of Colorado because that is not the purpose of the law. So what I'm saying here, if Ohio State comes to that same conclusion, even if they take down the notes and file the report, there's nothing to file. They're just going to basically still point this back to the cops. They've taken down the notes. Best case scenario, even if Zach Smith is fired over this, does that really protect Courtney Smith? That's not going to protect her, because the reason being, at that point, is they're still married. He still goes home. If domestic abuse was already happening, it doesn't stop. Nothing Ohio State can do at that point protects Courtney Smith from her alleged domestic abuser husband. So that's why I'm saying you have to ask yourself not just what you think Urban Meyer should have done if you have all the facts, but you have to ask, what could he have reasonably done? And that's even if you assume all the facts, and you can't assume the facts. You don't know what was going through his mind. You don't know the information he was operating off of. All of those are key points. But if we remove the legal obligation of whether he was required to report, you have to ask yourself, if he wasn't required, that's because they have no legal jurisdiction to even take the report. So if they don't have a legal jurisdiction, you can argue morality all you want, but if they can't take the report and the police already didn't do anything about it, Ohio State was not in a position where it could have protected Courtney Smith if she were being abused. So just ask yourself that question. If you assume that those allegations were true, or at least you assume that she did in fact file the reports with the police and they weren't taken seriously, what could have Ohio State done to change that situation? They could not have protected Courtney Smith. They could have fired Zach Smith if they had reason to believe so. If that were within their contractual right to do so, they could have fired him, sure. And if he was abusing her, maybe that's justified. In my mind, that probably is. I'm fine with that. If he really is abusing his wife, I'm fine with him being fired. But that doesn't protect Courtney Smith. All he becomes then is, instead of an abuser, he becomes an abuser who has more time on his hands with money. And guess what? There's still the problems at home. Those aren't changing. And unfortunately, that's a sad reality, is we all want justice for somebody. If a woman is truly being beaten, we want justice for that woman. We just have to ask ourselves, could Ohio State have given her justice? And I don't think that the answer is yes. That doesn't mean Urban Meyer should just raise his hands, and if he thinks that she's getting abused, that's the end of it. But I'm not sure there's a realistic solution here that would have prevented anything. And that's just something I want people to think about. Again, I don't know what Zach Smith did or didn't do. I don't know what Courtney Smith did or didn't do. I don't know what Urban Meyer did or did not know. All I'm saying is we don't have the facts, and I'm not sure that there's really a correct answer, even if we do, because the law is a little murkier. Now that I mentioned the law, let's talk about that real fast, because I know this is an aspect clearly from Twitter people care about, and maybe it's being underreported or inaccurately reported in the media. And this is one of the reasons why I stepped to the plate on this. Look, I can tell you right now, and I'm just going to be blunt about this. I will get into the aspect of sexual misconduct here in a second. As far as Title IX is concerned, this is not an issue. And I'm going to say this clearly, confidently, and with no wiggle room whatsoever. Title IX came about in 1972. It was an outreach and an outgrowth of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The reason being, at the time, was women especially were not being given equal opportunity and equal rights at colleges and universities. They were being harassed and discriminated against because of their gender. So Title IX was created as a way to help bridge that gap with all the harassment and discrimination going on at university campuses. What became a big deal in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was all of the campus crime that was being reported. Look, this was not a good place for colleges at the time. There was a lot of underreported rape and domestic abuse because especially, and colleges were very much culprits in this because crime statistics were a big thing for campuses, and they were trying to use this as we have a safe campus. And one of the ways that this was happening were colleges were forcing, or not forcing, but intimidating women into not going after their accusers. And so the government really needed a way to continue to force colleges to assist potential victims into going after their abusers. And that was really a big thing at the time, and that's one of the things that Title IX came about. Title IX, in its very basic form, is there to protect people, specifically colleges and universities, high schools, elementary schools as well, protect the students and the employees from discrimination and harassment. That is it. That is students and employees at institutions that accept public funds, in educational programs at institutions that accept federal funds. That is the Title IV program, if you want to be technical. And basically what that means is like FAFSA, federal aid, Pell Grants, anything of that form. Any kind of grant or loan from the federal government. If your school accepts it and you are a student within an educational program, then you are protected by Title IX. And it was later that basically discrimination became encompassing of sexual abuse as well. That is considered a form of discrimination because basically the victim does not have its full rights. So Title IX applies to students and employees at universities. It does not apply to ex-wives. It does not apply to wives. It does not apply to non-students. It does not apply to visitors onto campus. Only applies to students and to employees, specifically students, but employees as well in the form of discrimination, harassment, that sort of thing. So Title IX, absolutely not an issue here. Urban Meyer is not, and I repeat, is not guilty of Title IX violations because that's simply, Courtney Smith does not fit that definition. So let's go ahead and eliminate that argument right away. If you hear it on Twitter, if you hear it by a reporter, it's inaccurate. They may not all mean Title IX when they're discussing this. Some of them are actually referring to the sexual misconduct policy, and they're lumping that in with Title IX, which, by the way, can be confusing because the Title IX coordinator at every college and university also handles the HR/sexual misconduct policies. So they're handled by the same people, but they are not the same thing. Title IX is the federal, statute that protects students and employees of universities that accept federal funds. And so Urban Meyer, absolutely not guilty of Title IX. Ohio State is not in any jeopardy when it comes to Title IX, so you can throw out the possibilities of accreditation and all of that. That is not a factor here. Item number 2. And this brings us to a little bit murkier waters. Urban Meyer, in his contract, is required to report all possible suspected violations of the sexual misconduct policy. What that is the document that basically governs every single Ohio State employee. So anybody in HR, professors, everybody is governed by the sexual misconduct policy. That includes harassment. That includes domestic abuse, by the way. Domestic abuse is covered in the sexual misconduct policy. It includes rape. Every form of sexual misconduct you can imagine is included in that. And Urban Meyer, because he is a supervisor role at Ohio State as a head football coach, he is required mandatory reporting of any suspected violation that falls within the sexual misconduct policy. That part, not in dispute. Here is where the issue lies. I am told by a source that Ohio State's policy and the purpose of the policy is to protect students, it's to protect employees, it's to protect vendors, protect visitors. The policy is meant to basically protect anybody that has any association with Ohio State, either on campus in a physical capacity or taking part in a university event. And that's, if you read the sexual misconduct policy at Ohio State, you will find it says this policy applies to university property and to also university-sponsored events regardless of the location. That part seems pretty clear, cut and dry, and that is consistent with what I'm told, that the policy is there to protect things that could happen at Ohio State or on Ohio State's direct watch. And if you think back to the Colorado case I mentioned, the federal judge said it himself, the policy was never designed to protect the ex-girlfriend. That is not somebody that was supposed to be protected by the Colorado statute, okay? Not by Title IX or not by Colorado's HR policy itself. That is my belief where we sit with Ohio State as of today. Now, there is one murky gray area because also in that policy, there is some latitude for the Title IX coordinator to handle allegations that occur off campus if it creates a hostile environment. That's the wiggle room where a mandatory reporter like Urban Meyer maybe still is required to report a domestic incident. But here's why I don't believe that is the case. And this is why my stance is that Ohio State or Urban Meyer specifically, is not guilty of violating the sexual misconduct policy. Because let's face it, again, is Courtney Smith the person that is designed to be protected under Ohio State sexual misconduct policy? From just a common sense standpoint, I would say no, she's not, because she is not affiliated with the university. She does not work at the university. She does not come to the university. So any action that would be taken against Zach Smith in Ohio State's capacity does not help Courtney Smith. Zach Smith could be suspended from the university. He could be asked to leave university property. They could do all these things. They could investigate him. But that is not taking him out of Courtney Smith's home. That is not taking him out of her danger, if in fact he is a danger and a threat to her. The purpose of this policy is to remove an imminent danger from a potential victim either on Ohio State property or in Ohio State's direct supervision. That policy would not help Courtney Smith, and that is why I do not believe Urban Meyer is likely guilty of violating this policy in terms of his obligations to report a possible domestic abuse. Which, by the way, like I said, domestic abuse is covered in the Ohio State sexual misconduct policy. But again, it is my opinion, it's only covered if it occurs at a university event or on university property. That's my stance on that. Look, there is some wiggle room. I'm not going to claim 100% that there is no sexual misconduct policy violated by Urban Meyer not reporting this, if in fact he knew. And again, that's a huge part of this. We don't know Urban Meyer knew. We don't know what he knew and when. We don't even know if he did know, did he ever report it? We don't know any of that stuff. So huge caveat there. But it is my opinion, most likely based on what I know of the situation, I'm thinking it's probably not likely that a violation has occurred there. That's all I got to say about that. So Urban Meyer right now, paid administrative leave. Ryan Day is your acting head football coach as we start Ohio State football season as of today. Fall practice getting into full gear. We're ready to go. It's not very exciting, or maybe to some of you. I don't know. Maybe it is. Tell me, are you excited about the season? Tweet at me, KY Lamb, the number 8. Don't let this cloud hang over you and drag you down and make you grumpy. Okay? Fight through this. I'm not going to promise you everything is going to be okay, but I think everything is going to be okay. I think this investigative board will find there are no violations here. I think Urban Meyer will come out of this probably no worse than a couple game suspension. I'm not even sure there'll be a suspension because I don't think they'll admit guilt. And if they were going to admit guilt, then I think they would just go the full measure. You know, are you a Breaking Bad fan? Is this a half measure or a full measure? I think they'll go the full measure. If there is actually something to the violation, I don't think there will be. I think Urban Meyer probably will remain head coach, but we don't know. We just don't know. There's so much we don't know about this. Looking forward to a quick resolution, hopefully quick. It could drag on for weeks. I hope it'll be quick, though, because I got to be honest, I'm probably going to be as tired of talking about it as you are listening to it, but thank you for bearing with me. So, hey, you know what? It's time for some basketball talk.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
Basketball. Let's talk some basketball because I got to be honest with you, it's the thing that brightens my day right now. If for no other reason, look, I'm not going to be a pessimist, and I'm not going to try to drag you down about the Urban Meyer stuff because I really not sure this is going to wind up looking all that bad when all things are said and done. I think they'll resolve themselves I think it'll resolve itself in an okay manner for Ohio State. There's always going to be that dark cloud of negativity, and you're going to be people calling Urban Meyer this, calling Urban Meyer that. But regardless of what you feel about Ohio State football, there is some exciting future ahead for Ohio State basketball too, because Chris Holtmann got himself a good young team this year. They're talented. Got to see him again here for the second time this past Tuesday. And I got to tell you this. Look, the practice itself, especially the scrimmage, they scrimmaged 7-on-7. It wasn't very good offensive basketball. There were some turnovers. They missed a lot of shots. You could tell they were in July form, especially with the 4 freshmen. Even Keyshawn Woods, the graduate transfer, still trying to find his way. C.J. Walker, of course, the sophomore transfer from Florida State, trying to find his way. He won't be eligible this year anyway, so they have time with him for him to come on. Justin Aaron's really struggled, but you can see the talent with him. He's going to be a good shooter, a good player in time, but it's going to take him some time to not only adjust to the speed of the game, but the strength of the game. Luther Muhammad and Jaden Leday, I got to tell you, I was really impressed with these two. Offensively, they're a little rough around the edges, but I got to tell you what. Both of them long, both of them athletic. Luther Muhammad, a 6'4 guard. Jaden Leday, a 6'8 forward. They both were just all over the court with hustle, intensity. Everything they did, they were active, great hands, great feet. They were jumping to the spots, moving their feet defensively, challenging shots. Everything I saw from these two, I think people are going to love these two. Their offensive games may be a little hit or miss early on. You got to expect that from freshmen. But you're going to love their attitude. You're going to love their junkyard dog mentality on the basketball court. You're going to see a young, hungry, albeit inexperienced team on Ohio State's floor this year. Remember, it'll be a new basketball court, by the way. They'll be unveiling that later this fall. I think right before the first game, if I'm not mistaken. But there will be a new basketball court. But you're going to see a young, hungry team on the floor for Ohio State this year. It's going to have some ups and downs. I think it's a team that could be very dangerous come March if they are able to get their way into the tournament. And, Dwayne Washington, maybe not the same athletic junkyard dog mentality that Muhammad and Leday has, but Dwayne Washington, a very under control, poised player. I think he's a little further ahead offensively than the other two. Very good shooter, nice stroke. He played under control. He acted like a guy that really is comfortable at this level already. I think he's somebody that's going to contribute right away too, probably more so offensively. I think Muhammad and Leday are probably going to see the floor because of their defense, intensity, and rebounding. But look, this is a good basketball team. They're going to have to rely a lot on C.J. Jackson and Caleb Wesson. Those two are going to have to be consistent. Jackson as a point guard, Wesson as a center. Of course, Keyshawn Woods as a graduate transfer from Wake Forest is a guy very physical. He's a big body like Jaquan Lyle was. He's still finding his way into the system. He's a very talented player. Somebody I think will contribute for Ohio State. May take him a few weeks to really get in the flow of the offense, but he's somebody Ohio State is going to need to step up as well. Musa Jallo, Kyle Young, going to have to take big steps forward as sophomores. I think that both of them will. This is going to be a good Ohio State team. Like last year, you are going to love this Ohio State basketball team because every single player, every single kid on that team, great player, great kid, guys that you want to root for. They're going to be fun to watch because they're going to hustle for basketballs. They're going to die for loose balls, that is. They're just going to be an inspiring team to watch. It may not result in 25 wins like it did last year, but they're going to be fun to watch nonetheless. And next year, remember next year they got DJ Carton, Alonzo Gaffney coming in for sure. EJ Liddell will be visiting Ohio State in the first week of September 1st for the Oregon State basketball game, or Oregon State football game. That's going to be fun to watch. That Ohio State team next year going to have 13 scholarship players as it stands right now. Every single one of them on paper should be able to contribute. So great times ahead for Ohio State basketball. Hopefully Ohio State football, this is just a blip on the radar. I really sincerely hope in 3 weeks from now we're not discussing who Ohio State is going to be hiring next year as a full-time head coach. That would be a somber discussion, and frankly, that's not the way I want to spend the end of my August and 1st of September. I'm supposed to be excited about football season. I know you are. Ohio State number 3 in the country preseason coaches poll. Let's talk about that. Let's find a reason to be excited going forward. Very excited. Anyway, so next week, I want to tease this because I think this is very exciting. Next Monday, we'll continue to monitor the Urban Meyer situation. Are there any breaks in the investigation? We will talk about that. Hope to have some national football guests, and I promise Brett McMurphy and his Mustache will not be on this program. You have my promise that he will not be discussing college football or anything on this Unscripted Ohio podcast, but we are looking to get some national guests here going forward, so hopefully I will have some names for you to very soon in the near future to discuss college football as we ramp up to our coverage of the 2018 football season. But next week also tentatively planned on the show, Clark Kellogg, former Ohio State University basketball player, CBS national basketball analyst. That'll be exciting to talk to Clark. We should have him probably next Friday, but I will keep you posted on that. But we're looking to have him on the show next Friday. So very exciting stuff coming up on Unscripted Ohio. I'm excited. Come back with us Monday. We'll, of course, talk about all this. We'll get into some more, not only the Urban Meyer stuff and the coaching stuff, but hopefully we'll talk some actual football as well. So hope you'll stay tuned for that. Mark Gibler coming up soon. Kevin Noon, all those guys from Buckeye Grove, they will join me in the near future. As Unscripted Ohio ramping up to the 2018 football season, very excited. Hope everybody has a great weekend. You guys need it. You deserve it. Go out, treat yourself. If it's nice this weekend, go out and get some ice cream. Maybe have a picnic with the kids. Do something fun. Get your mind off the negativity. Things will be okay. I'm not going to sit here and sing Bob Marley to you all because I don't want to patronize you and I don't want to hurt your ears, and you probably would never listen to the podcast again if I started singing. So I'm just saying, treat yourself. Have a great weekend. Come back and hear me on Unscripted Ohio on Monday. You can catch us on the archives, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and of course, Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. Thanks, everybody. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.